great to be here. I know it's a tough time spot to speak, 6 p.m. You can smell already the dinner is being set up, so everyone that made it here, welcome to the session. I hope we're going to have a good one. Now, winning Southeast Asia by air. Let's talk about that. And before we do that, I would actually like to start with a little something that happened to me a few weeks ago around Valentine's time that has to do with this bottle, which I thought is a pretty innocent looking bottle. It's apparently a collector's item that you can only get in certain cities. So one of my friends from Europe asked me to bring this bottle back from Singapore. Now, I'm based in KL, not far from Singapore, and he said, can you not bring that back to me? And I said, no problem. So I went to the website of a very famous American coffee chain that sells this bottle, and I tried to get a hand on this. And from KL, and the first thing I figured out that you can actually not access the web shop of that coffee brand in Singapore from KL. So that was the first barrier that I had to get a VPN going to even be able to see this product. Now, a second question was, would they deliver this to me from Singapore to KL, right? Very close by, and the answer was no, they only deliver within Singapore. It's like, okay, I have a lot of colleagues in Singapore. Can someone maybe order it for me? And the next revelation was the delivery time within Singapore for this product was 7 working days, domestic, okay? Now, I ordered to my kind colleague, and ultimately he shipped it then from Singapore to KL with teleport next day. Now, why am I telling you this story? Because I think the story resonates with a lot of the reasons why teleport exists today and some of the problems that we actually try to solve for brands when it comes to fast and reliable and cheap delivery of goods for brands within Southeast Asia and beyond Southeast Asia. Now, I think brands face new expectations. Maybe in the past it was okay to have customers wait for your products. Maybe in the past it was okay for customers to not have products available for them to purchase. But I think no one wants to wait, which is not only true for highly developed markets logistically or e-commerce-wise in China or Europe or the United States. I think that's also actually true for Southeast Asia. Now, I don't think I tell people a brand new news surprise here that I think customers are getting much more sensitive when it comes to delivery times. Most people, almost all the people now expect deliveries for e-commerce, especially from brands and not just from e-commerce platforms, within 2 days. And about half of them actually expect stuff to come within 24 hours or the next day, right? And I think that's a reality globally. Now, I face a lot of conversations when I talk to colleagues in logistics in Southeast Asia or China that try to tell me that Southeast Asia is different and people love to wait for their stuff for a week or two, which I don't think is actually true. And humans over here have the same desire to get their stuff as quickly as possible. Now, ultimately, if you're not fast and if you're not reliable in your delivery as a brand, for your customers, you have a perception problem. Customers want it fast, and they want it as you promise it to them. And if you don't do that, then either they stop shopping with you, your brand perception suffers, or your repurchase rate is dropping, right? So I think that's why it's important that you have fast and especially reliable deliveries. So I will talk a little bit now about how that is no different in Southeast Asia, actually, right? Even in Southeast Asia, you have 60% of the people that says, if you wait too long, I won't use your brand anymore in the future. So expectations are shifting. It is a price-conscious market, but people also still expect cheap and fast and reliable. We get to that in a second at the same time. And I think the trend is very clear, what we see in Southeast Asia as well. The reality, however, when it comes to delivery times, Southeast Asia, for good reasons, is still lacking behind some of the most developed logistics markets that we see in the world, namely China, US, Europe, and a few others. Delivery times, especially cross-border delivery times, meaning e-commerce goods coming from China. If you're brand.com, maybe you fulfill from Singapore to Southeast Asia, or maybe from Thailand. So domestically, within Southeast Asia and from China, delivery times actually very different to the expectations we just saw, which is within 2 days, within 24 hours. Now, why is it so hard? Why are delivery times so long, or on average longer than maybe in other parts of the world? Is Southeast Asia is not an easy geography to be fast and reliable. a lot of islands, a lot of different countries, customs to clear, many different logistics providers. Now, some of the examples that we face every day, maybe if you're a brand from behind the curtains, you can relate to some of these things. Heavy traffic, if you have a supply chain journey. Now, we focus a lot on air freight. We always have an element in our journeys that goes on a plane, which we think is a great infrastructure for this part of the world. But usually the journey doesn't start at the airport. The journey usually starts in a warehouse or at a customer where we pick it up. And the way to the airport in most of the capital cities in Southeast Asia is a problem. There's congestion issues, there's infrastructure issues with the roads. So you have heavy traffic, and in many cases you miss your flight and you have a problem, and that's where your delays and your customer disappointment start. The fuel limitations is just an example that happened actually 2 weeks ago, where in Tawau, which is one station in East Malaysia, from one day to the other, the airport operator would say, we don't have enough fuel, so that means your aircraft have to come with more fuel on board, which limits your cargo capacity, which means for us going to our customer saying, you booked your cargo, you booked your parcels, we can't bring them because there's no fuel. Okay, very specific, but very real example that we face every day. Last year, we had a big volcano eruption, which happens frequently in this part of the world, in Indonesia, that had a big ash cloud, like we've seen many years ago in Iceland, in a European context, that covered half of East Malaysia, which meant for a week, many of your flights you couldn't operate. Right? And all these are reasons why you see delivery times being longer, why you see fast deliveries being an issue, reliability of deliveries being an issue as well. Okay, so just to give a bit of a flavor of the kind of stuff, right? Examples that actually make this part of the world very challenging, and yet you have a customer base as brands that has the same expectations of fast and reliable deliveries. Now, I think many of you have seen this, not necessarily specific to logistics, but it is ultimately the customer expectations. They always want everything, a good service, a fast service, and a cheap service. And as the common wisdom goes, you can choose 2 of these areas, but not all 3 of them. And yet Teleport has gone out and say, can we deliver all 3 of them? Okay, and I'll try to convince you today that we have a model that can achieve all 3 of them: fast deliveries, reliable deliveries, and making them actually affordable. Okay, now many brands are out there claiming that, so I try to convince you that we actually have a bit of an edge on why we can actually deliver this. So is it possible? Now, a bit of a rhetorical question. If it is possible, I think actually it is possible, but there's a few things that you need to make it happen. I think the first key thing is you need the right network in order to achieve these things: fast, reliable, and affordable for Southeast Asia. Now, maybe I can exemplify a little bit what we mean with the right network, right? If you look at a typical e-commerce journey or brand.com journey, which in many cases starts in China and then goes down into Southeast Asia, you would usually start somewhere, let's say, in the Greater Bay Area, in Guangzhou, in a warehouse of a manufacturer or retailer or e-commerce platform, and you would ship the stuff normally to Hong Kong via truck or via barge. Then you bring it, in this case, for example, you want to serve a customer in Lombok, you bring it to Jakarta. Usually flights go straight to capital cities. You have a connecting flight to the east of Java, and then you would put it either on a barge or a truck and get it to Lombok and then have last mile delivery, right? So this is a pretty standard journey, I would say, and I'd say a lot of the more legacy logistics players are kind of locked into that journey, right? That is the journey they have available. That's where they have their contracts, that's where they have bought the space on the trucks and bought the space on the aircraft, and that's kind of the journey they're committed to. And it's a bit one-dimensional. And the more one-dimensional it is, the more risk you have when it comes to reliability, the more risk you have when you want to switch your journey, when something happens, when you see maybe prices are changing, available capacity is changing. So you have a lot of connection points. Things can go wrong, and that's the risk for your reliability and your speed in delivery. Okay? So this is a bit the traditional model, I would say. Now, the benefit we have in Teleport, due to the network that we've built, and that is not just AirAsia. Many of you might associate Teleport with AirAsia. It is beyond that. It is also our own freighter planes. It is third-party airlines where we have access to capacity. It allows us actually to route things in different ways, to be more flexible. Okay? And this is an example because we do that a lot. We ship from China via Southeast Asia to Oceania, to Australia, to New Zealand. And because of the network we built, there's many different ways we can do that. You can see we leverage the freighter aircraft that we operate. We leverage the passenger AOCs that we operate, in this case, the wide-body passenger aircraft AOCs that AirAsia has. We leverage Air New Zealand, for example, and we have different points where we can connect. Now, because we control this network and we have access to this network, we can be flexible and we can react to either disruptions or we can react to economic benefits, where things are actually cheaper to move maybe one thing this way or another way, or a particular type of cargo is maybe better routed this way or another way. And if there's disruptions, we have alternatives. And that alternative helps us to be more reliable. Now, why is that possible? It's possible because we have a network, a very dense network. At the moment, across our network, we have more than 1,200 departures every day, just on the air side, on the aircraft side. So we have a lot of tier 2, tier 3 cities, 85 cities connecting in Southeast Asia alone. So we not just fly from one capital to the other capital, we actually fly to many islands, tier 2, tier 3 cities directly, without having to connect multiple times, without having to change mode of transport multiple times. So the most point-to-point connections as an air network with Teleport in Southeast Asia. We are an airline-agnostic network. We did start the journey of Teleport 7 years ago as AirAsia exclusive, and we still are AirAsia exclusive. So we are the only ones that can put something on AirAsia's 200 planes that fly to all these 85 cities, but we also added own freighter aircraft. We have actually, we can go to this slide, we have 3 A321 freighter aircraft that we can use flexibly into China, into Vietnam, into Hong Kong, into East Malaysia, into different parts of Asia. We have still that AirAsia fleet, which is now around 200 aircraft strong, wide and narrow body aircraft, which are very suitable for brand and e-commerce movements. Because mainly on the narrow bodies, I mean, those of you experts in the field know on narrow bodies, they're very suitable for loose cargo. So we can use that network for that very well. And then about 2 years ago, we started signing up other airlines, and we can do that on an interline basis. We can do that as a freight forwarder. We can do swap of space on different aircraft types and different routes. We charter flights and charter freighter aircraft on top of the ones that we have. So we're really building a hybrid kind of fleet, and that gives us the flexibility that we need in order to react to disruptions and to optimize the price for our customers. Now, that ability to use not just one flight that we locked ourselves in, let's say as a freight forwarder for long periods of time, but the ability to use the big network that we have access to actually allows us to be cheaper, because we can route it in a smart way, ultimately to our customers, and pass that cost saving on. The other benefit is we also use a largely passenger-based aircraft network, okay, which has an economic benefit because there's also passengers on the aircraft that are paying for part of the journey. So we can be cost effective. And if you look at hub-to-hub movements, which is still a large part of what we do, from one warehouse to another warehouse within Southeast Asia or from China to Southeast Asia, we're about 15 to 20% cheaper than the competitors in the same space. Now, on a door-to-door delivery, which we also do, we'll get to that in a second. So we literally pick up here from your house, and for some of you, actually, we've invited you in the last few days, for those of you that registered to the session, to try our service. Actually, we sent you a little parcel to your hotel, so maybe some of you can relate to this. We do also a door-to-door delivery service for a bunch of Southeast Asian countries already with our own infrastructure, end-to-end, first-mile drivers, last-mile drivers, custom clearance, trucking, and the air network. We've stitched that all together. And there we're actually 3 times cheaper than the competitors that offer next day as well, which to date is still a very rare service to find, a guaranteed next day service within Southeast Asia. Now, aside from the network that you need, we want to offer you as brands, right, that serve their customers, the ability to adapt your needs. We're not going out with a standard product and say, this is what you got to take, but we say, we listen to what you want, and we have a wide network beyond the air part, so we can customize. Okay, and we do that for most customers. We say we listen to from where to where you want to deliver, and we use actually capabilities beyond the aircraft that we have. So the Teleport network really is not just the aircraft. We don't start a journey at the airport. Because you as brands and for your customers, obviously the journey doesn't start at the airport. The journey usually starts in your warehouse or maybe at your manufacturer. So we want to pick up the goods from you directly, where you have them produced or where you have them in storage, and deliver it to your customer directly. For that, we built end-to-end infrastructure for some of the key markets: Singapore, Thailand, Malaysia, Hong Kong. We built the end-to-end infrastructure ourselves. We have first and last mile riders ourselves. We have custom clearance, import and export ourselves. We have trucking, we have sortation, we have contracts with CTOs at the airports, and obviously we have access to the aircraft as well, so we can make the journey end-to-end seamless, guaranteed next day. For the other countries, we have partners that actually help us to do the journey end-to-end. So if you come to us, it is not about I'm booking cargo from one airport to one airport, but it's really about I have a need as a brand to get it from a hub or a warehouse to another warehouse. We can do that. To get it from a warehouse to a customer, we can also do that. Now, you learned a little bit about the infrastructure that we have, and that gives us a little bit of an edge, actually, over other companies. Now, if I relate back to the 3 problems that I introduced to you that are maybe not unique, but common in Southeast Asia, right? What did I mention? I mentioned there's heavy traffic. A lot of the capital cities or even non-capital cities are congested in Southeast Asia. So you have an issue getting stuff to the airport on time, not miss your flight. Now, with a lot of the legacy logistics providers, you have that 1 flight departure a day or maybe 2 flight departures a day. You miss that cutoff time, a few hours before flight departure, you miss the flight, there will be delay because that's the 1 flight you have a day. Because we have an access to a high frequency network, just examples here. KL to Singapore 11 times a day, KL to East Malaysia 13 times a day. You miss the 10 a.m. departure, we put you on the 12. You miss the 12, we put you on the 1:30, right? And so it goes. So this problem, we have a big help with the frequency of the network and the density of the network. The other one I mentioned is the fuel limitations. We had an issue, as I mentioned, 2 weeks ago. Tawau station said not enough fuel. We had to put limitations on the cargo on the aircraft. So what do? We fly the cargo to BKI via the network, and from BKI we fly it a different station in East Malaysia, we fly it to Tawau. So we split it up in 2 parts of the journey, no restriction on fuel. We can still deliver. Even though we have that constraint, we can still deliver. If you have only an aircraft that is scheduled to Tawau and no network, you're stuck. Third one, geophysical events. I mentioned last year was a big volcano eruption. How do you deal with that? You have half of East Malaysia cut off because of a big cloud of ash. You fly to an airport in East Malaysia on the south tip that is not affected. You put it on your truck, because we also do that, and then you ship it to where it has to go, right? So I just try to make that really close the circle here and tell you how actually very practically we can tackle some of those problems for our customers and make it reliable by having that access to the network that we do. Now, maybe a little case study. I have actually 2 case studies. One is relating to a lot of the e-commerce platforms that we have, which I think are a great proof point that what we offer matters to them. I think in the past, when big Chinese e-commerce platforms work with freight forwarders or airlines directly, usually they don't have access to the width of the network or the frequency, and they would always have to have one contract with a forwarder here and maybe another contract with the custom clearance agents. And usually they lock themselves into specific sectors and they have to repeat those business negotiations again and again for different sectors, for different countries, right? So when we approached them and said we can actually fly to all the countries, have access to all the different sectors on our own aircraft, plus third-party aircraft where we have secured space, that is attractive to them, because they have one contact point that can help them to organize the journey end-to-end and don't have to split the journey, and as well for all the sectors and all the countries in Southeast Asia. We started that journey with Chinese e-commerce platforms early last year, and you see it was a convincing value proposition to them. So you see very quickly the volumes ramped up, and they saw the value for their customers that ultimately they got from an operational perspective, but also from a brand perception, that it is fast, it's reliable, there's a network that can compensate for hiccups that happen in this part of the world. Now, we don't only serve the big e-commerce platforms, we also serve a lot of SMBs, bigbrands.com, small SMBs that are already using our next day service within Southeast Asia and that really see the benefits. So I would like to let one of our customers actually speak for that and give you a bit of an impression on how that actually impacts the business.
In the website, we have a lot of customers add product to the cart already, but they didn't check it out because the shipping cost is almost like a product. For me, it's service.
Just let a man breathe and just hush so my mind could just.
My name is Vin. We're like the co-founder of the Truffle band.
My favorite things about Truffle is our own style.
I'd say it'd be utility, casual, and everyday.
The pants and the shirt is easy to wear in every day, so I can just grab it and just one shirt and one pant is we can go out.
Truffle is about friends. Introduce them about how to be a minimalist Japanese style. For the Truffle original, we do some like more timeless but more design and functional.
We used teleport next day because even though we knew that our customer from Singapore and Malaysia, they expected international shipping would take days, but it's really nice to get to them like the very next day.
It's not the Thai people, right? Actually, from Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Hong Kong, Taiwan. For me, the correct courier is really the most important thing. After we use the teleport next day, actually we have more customers. The time is good for the customer.
They're gonna save you time, save you money, and make your customer happy.
So you can actually try that yourself. Maybe close the circle. The same experience I had here with I'm not going to mention the name, but the very famous kind of coffee brand having trouble ordering from Singapore to KL is a problem we try to solve. And we solve that today for thousands of small brands already across Southeast Asia, between Singapore, Thailand, Malaysia, and now we just opened Hong Kong. Indonesia is on the list to open this year as well, to make e-commerce and brand business easy in this region, accessible, affordable. Now going back, good, fast, cheap, that Venn diagram, right, where you always have to pick two at the expense of the third one. We think for brands, for SMBs, for Chinese or other e-commerce platforms that have ultimately high demand customers that are expecting deliveries within 2 days, within 1 day, with the network we have, with the unfair advantage that we have of having access to a network like that, and the additional infrastructure we build on top of that, the trucking, the custom clearance, the first mile, last mile in key markets, we actually think we can deliver good, fast, and cheap. Again, some of you we invited already to try the product. If someone after this presentation would like to try for themselves and do a shipment, or we can send you a little gift and experience that yourself. That is not just a marketing story, but actually real, and we can do that. And we truly believe it has the potential to change this region and to change how business is done in this region and how we can actually fulfill customer expectations, which I argue are no different in Southeast Asia compared to any other part of the world. Okay, so I think with that we wrap it up, and very happy to take questions from you guys if you want to challenge me on any of these things today.
I think this is a very interesting proposition, especially for retailers. I've been struggling so much with clients of me that had this challenge within Southeast Asia, getting products around quickly, easy. This is perfect. It sounds really good. Any questions for Jan Philipp?
Hello, I'm from Decathlon. It's very interesting. Do you measure the CO2 emission per article that you send like that?
We don't measure the CO2 emissions, but the way we think about this is because we mainly use existing infrastructure. Right? Yes, we have 3 freighter aircraft, but what we mainly operate on is actually the passenger aircraft network, where we feel these are aircraft that are already flying, and we try to optimize and put things on those aircraft. Most passenger aircraft in the world actually have no cargo, which is also true for AirAsia's network. There's still a lot of chunks that are flying anyways, and you could put cargo on that, and you don't have to inject more and more freighter aircraft like some of our competitors are doing. They're building complete freighter networks, okay, which you always have to fill up, and that's additional metal flying around. Whereas our way of looking at sustainability, which I think is behind that question maybe, is around using an existing network and the existing infrastructure, not have to have more planes flying, but optimize the ones that already fly. That's why we're also very keen on not necessarily have to increase the fleet of freighters that we have for that reason and other reasons, but leverage already the 200 planes we have with AirAsia and the partner airlines. So we're rather there to optimize, not just for us, but also for other airlines, the capacity that already exists. Because most of passenger aircraft are actually empty. There's a few exceptions to that, the very long-haul ones, but mainly the short-haul aircraft in the world, right, are usually empty. So we try to optimize that.
I think that's really strong, because in Europe we challenge that e-commerce businesses don't ship half-filled boxes, so you're actually shipping air. But in this case, you actually prevent that there are half-filled airplanes flying around because you're utilizing the cargo space. It's perfect. Any more questions from the audience?
Thank you.
I do have one question. Oh, sorry. Yeah, ladies first.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Shinta from Lux House. Honestly, I'm unfamiliar with your business model, so this is my first time learning about it, and it was a very insightful presentation. Thanks for that. I'm just curious, is Teleport the first one to offer such UVPs in the Southeast Asia? And if yes, why so? So yeah, just curious about that. Are you guys the first mover, or do you have others that you would consider as competitors?
The value proposition that we set ourselves out there, which is connecting all of Southeast Asia, next day. With that one, we're the only ones. And it is arguably very ambitious to do that, right? Now, we have a lot of competitors, obviously, in the logistics space, in the parcel movement space. And there's different benefits or different advantages you can have to a supply chain. Now, I think most of the competitors have advantages on maybe the first mile and the last mile, right? Where they build up the network, the riders, the trucking, the sort centers, the local distribution, right? We actually don't want to own that, right? We have to own a little bit of that because we have to scale. Because if we don't have the scale on small parcel movements, the traditional guys that are actually good at the first and last mile won't listen to us and adopt their network to our flight plan. So we have to build a little bit ourselves first to prove the point and build up the volume, okay? Now, the expensive part, actually, if you think about it, is the aircraft. Okay, having aircraft, running aircraft, having access to airline operating companies. AirAsia is actually, many don't know that, is not one company, it's actually 7 AOCs in different Southeast Asian countries that we all combined as Teleport from a logistics perspective. And I think in that sense, from an unfair advantage of access to the most expensive part, the most hardest part to manage of the infrastructure, which is the airplanes flying from one point to the other, I think we're the only one. Combining that ambition. Now, most airlines have cargo departments, right? And cargo departments, they don't build logistics companies. They worry about port-to-port movements. They say, I sell you from Singapore airport to Bangkok airport. That's what I do as a cargo department of an airline. And we very consciously said, this is such a great network, right? What can we do more with that, right? And then we said, let's start Teleport 7 years ago and be ambitious and not just say we want to move traditional pallets of general cargo. We actually want to enable SMBs in the region to do business faster and cheaper based on an existing infrastructure that already flies, right? And I think the ambition, not just to do it in 5 days, but to do it next day delivery, I think there's no one that challenges us in that space, right? I'm very happy to be convinced otherwise, but I think that ambition with that network, we're the only ones.
One double out on that. Thank you for elaborating.
I think the agility with this network goes through the roof because you have so many possibilities in the end. Yeah, perfect. So my question, because you mentioned the different tiers. Oh, sorry.
Now it's flowing.
Now it's flowing.
Maybe you can first.
I'll shut up.
No problem. I just curious about a slide. You have 3 circles. The last slide. Yeah, this one. I want to know why you mean the cheap and the fast means unreliable, right? I remember that's your slide. I want to know why.
So usually I would say in logistics, you can go cheap and let's say good. Let's say as an example, as a brand, you can choose to deliver your parcels via ocean freight, right? Not necessarily an issue with reliability. It's pretty cheap, but it takes a lot of time, right? So I think, or you have other examples of, let's say, premium express companies, of which there's a few in the world, very famous, right? And they're usually fast and they're good, they're reliable, right? My friend just ordered something from Italy and it came in 2 days. I think it was FedEx, 2 days to Malaysia from Italy. That was a surprise for me, but it works. But you don't want to know how much that costs, right? It's expensive. So I think ultimately you have to choose. The traditional wisdom is you have to kind of choose. Why? Because if you are let's say one of the premium kind of logistics companies, you own a lot of that infrastructure, right? You own the freighter aircraft, you own the sort center, you own your yellow branded van everywhere in the world, and you have to pay for that infrastructure that allows you to be fast and reliable, but it costs. It costs, right? Now we try to circumvent that by integrating partners, by having a big chunk of that network ourselves. And that's, I think, why we can be actually cheap and good and fast, and we don't have to choose 2 out of the 3.
I'm going to reread the room if there are any more questions. No? Okay, good. You mentioned the different tiers in your presentation. Why is it so important for companies to understand the tier 2, 3 cities? How does it help them?
Yeah. I think ultimately, right, the theme was around fast and reliable, right? And if I can fly, the closest I can fly or directly design my supply chain ending at my customer with the fewest steps, the faster I am. And the more changes of transportation I have in my chain, the less points of friction or point of failure I have, right? Now, we have a lot of people in the capitals, no question about that, but we also have, I don't know what the number is, like Indonesia alone has 17,000 islands, and if you look at the region, there's probably more than 20,000 islands. There is a lot of people living in hardly or harder to access places, that's true. So we see a lot of those multimodal movements, right, including sea movements, air movements, transport movements, is very normal for a journey within Southeast Asia. And I think with the access to tier 2, tier 3 cities, where AirAsia was always very strong to bring flying and access to air travel to a lot of people in those tier 2, tier 3 cities where we have a strong network, now is an advantage because those same people that want to fly in Asia also would like to buy things online, right? From your brand or from your e-commerce platform, right? So that is an advantage now that we have in getting closer to them, straight. I can fly straight from Shenzhen to Bali, or straight from Guangzhou to East Malaysia, to Kota Kinabalu or to Kuching. I don't have to first go to one capital and then another capital and get stuck somewhere and have to wait for the truck, but it's flooding and the truck. So that's why I think it's a benefit for reliability and speed to have a network that goes straight into tier 2, tier 3 cities, because that's where a big chunk of the customers is.
Totally makes sense to me. Okay. I think that's it. Jan Philipp, thank you for the presentation.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.